Excellent.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Zusman with Willamette Week. Really lucky to be here with Hector Dominguez. Did I pronounce that right, Hector? Who is the Open Data Coordinator for the City of Portland. And we're here to talk to Hector about a landmark ordinance that the City of Portland passed last week that is first of a kind in the nation. Hector, let's first talk a little bit about yourself. Your title is the Open Data Coordinator for the City of Portland.
That's correct.
The reason why we're talking to you is that last week, the Portland City Council voted on, I guess, two ordinances involving the restricting the use of facial recognition software, which is a form of biometric software which can scan my face and in theory identify me. There have been a number of privacy concerns around the country. A couple of cities, I believe, have banned the use of facial recognition software by local governments. But your ordinances have gone further, as I understand it, because they both ban the use of facial recognition by governments within the city of Portland, but also ban the use of them by private organizations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So let's, if we can, what's wrong with facial recognition software? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. You know, intrinsically, there is nothing wrong with this software, you know. It's just as any other tool and algorithm. It is designed for a purpose, you know. In this case, it extracts facial features, biometric data, and then based on that, people, companies can use that information to identify a specific person. It's been used for unlocking your phone, contactless applications in general. You know, the challenge with that is that, and how everything started at the city was that these algorithms are actually recently new tools came to life, basically around big data, around artificial intelligence, and how using artificial intelligence algorithms, machine learning particularly, they could compare thousands of faces, just trying to train a specific program to identify that there is a face and extract biometric information from that face. The big challenge is that initially and even now, those databases that contain faces from people they don't contain as many black faces as they should. Therefore, these algorithms come to light bias, missing a lot of the information from those black faces, or missing information from women or older people, or you name it. So there are some biases there.
I know that there's an objection to the use of this software because of the flawed algorithms that are biased against people of color. And there are also some, independent of that, just some legitimate questions about invasion of privacy, even if the algorithm were working perfectly. But again, I'm just trying to, from the city's point of view, was your larger concern the flawed algorithms, or are you equally concerned about, you know, the criticisms that this is an unreasonable invasion of my privacy as an American?
Yeah, and that actually will answer the question of why we are using a ban rather than a moratorium, right? So the city is mostly concerned on the racial bias and gender bias that algorithms may have. That's the main concern that we have, given that the city just adopted some new core values, and one of those is being anti-racist. We also try to be along those lines and try to understand what being anti-racist represents in technology. And yeah, definitely it's the reason why we are banning is because at this moment, the racial bias and gender bias are big enough for taking that measure.
I know that we've done reporting in others that Jackson's, which is a chain of convenience stores, sort of like a plaid pantry, that they, in some of their stores, were using facial recognition. They will no longer be able to starting January. Are you aware of any other private employers in the city of Portland that are currently using it?
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, slowly some of these applications are coming to us. For instance, Uber and I think it's Uber or Lyft, they use face recognition to identify drivers. Um, so any private entity, a company, can use or is exempt to use from this policy, and they can use face recognition if there is any regulatory framework, any law or bill that allows them to do that. For instance, if it's something around security or safety in mobility, uh, they could do that. And at the moment, we are actually revising that.
So the ordinance carved out some exemptions.
Yes. Well, you know, yes, there are some exemptions, but also the ordinance is drafted in a way that is very specific on who this ordinance is applicable to. You know,
So Uber and Lyft will be able to continue to use facial recognition software.
we are revising that, but at the moment, I think that they would be able to, for that specific purpose, just for identifying drivers within the context of public safety.
It's my understanding that you also carved out the Port of Portland. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Port of Portland is its own jurisdiction, so we don't have jurisdiction over them.
Okay. Yeah. And Portland Public Schools?
Yep, same case.
Well,
we don't have jurisdiction over them.
I mean, I know Portland Public Schools is not a city of Portland government, but Portland Public Schools reside within the city of Portland.
That's correct. And however, any other jurisdiction is exempt from these two policies.
Who else is exempt, Hector?
You know, who is applicable to, I would say, is any private entity that or organization, NGOs, private schools, for instance, they would be considered under this ordinance. But any other government agency working within Portland, they are exempt. Counties, state or federal agencies, they are exempt. Portland Public Schools, as you mentioned as well.
When your group was considering this legislation and sort of writing it up, Amazon came to City Hall with their lobbyists and tried to push against it. There's been a lot of reporting that they spent $20,000. Were you in any of those meetings with Amazon?
Yes, I was, and not only Amazon. I mean, we have conversation not only with some Amazon lobbyists, but also Apple and some airlines, for instance. And as we see it, well, it's just trying to understand what is the context of the use of face recognition.
What was the argument Amazon and Apple were making about why you shouldn't have concerns about the use of this software? Do they dispute that all the research that shows that these algorithms currently are biased against people of color?
No, they did not. Actually, they did not.
If they didn't dispute that, what's their argument for why you shouldn't have promoted this ordinance?
I think it's, and this is just my own reading. We haven't really assessed that internally, officially in the city, but my own reading is that is some skepticism on how government can actually regulate these technologies. You know, are we, you know, from a private entity, a company, they make investments, and those investments need to, they are expecting some return of those investment and research and everything that they are putting in that technology. So if the government is going to come and suddenly stop that, it definitely has some it's going with some financial impacts to their markets and so on. So I think they were also trying to understand what we were doing. Those conversations where we just have, like with Apple, we just have one. With Amazon, we have two conversations.
Did you get any pushback from the law enforcement community?
So not push back, but and that's actually part of our one of the work sessions, the one that we did in January. There was some interest in keeping some options open for using face recognition as a way to support an ongoing investigation for crime.
Interesting. So Hector, if I'm a private employer and next year I start using facial recognition software in the city of Portland, I'll be in violation of the ordinance. If you catch me, what's the penalty?
Oh, well, the city is not going to really police that. If there is any damage created out of that, an individual can actually, well, report to the city, and we would inform that private entity that is in violation. But really the arm that is effective there is that the individual can actually claim damages or compensation for damages to a civil court.
So
And
this
then the
creates
judge,
liability for those companies.
exactly. And then the judge would decide what is the damage and what's the proper compensation from that.